Hello and welcome back to the Publisher Podcast from Media Voices. I'm Peter Houston. We're exploring the people and the products powering publishing, both through this podcast and in our adjacent weekly newsletter, which you can sign up for at voices.media. This week we're returning to a conversation I had with Simon Freeman when I was researching and writing Inside the Print Revival, our report on why print magazines are making headlines again. Simon is publisher at Like the Wind, a quarterly print magazine dedicated to exploring the culture, history and social issues in the world of running. I think a blueprint for sustainable indie magazine publishing. In our conversation we spoke about nichification, how it's okay that not every runner is a potential Like the Wind reader, how social media helps sell magazines as a marketing tool but also as a catalyst for readers returning to analogue media. First, I asked Simon to tell me Like the Wind's origin story.
So my wife and I had launched a business together, which was in the marketing space for running, cycling and outdoors brands. We'd been living together for a while. And one of the things was I had this collection of magazines. I had a collection of the Surfer's Journal. I was collecting Rouleur magazine. I was a subscriber to Monocle. There was some climbing magazines that I would sort of bring home occasionally or order. And Julie was saying to me, well, what's the attraction? Because you don't even own a bike. So why are you buying Rouleur? And I was like, well, I love the format. I just love the format. And I can sit and read a story about road cycling in the Pyrenees, despite the fact that it's not my passion. I was running 100 miles a week. I was running 9 times a week, twice a day, regularly. And it just literally started this conversation about, well, why does that magazine, Rouleur, the Ride Journal, Surfer's Journal, why does that not exist in running? And we didn't have an answer to that question. We had our own business, so our time was our own. This sounds apocryphal, but it's absolutely true. Julie was like, well, we should try. Like, let's try. How hard can it be? I'm going to get it put on a T-shirt. And that was in the September 2013, and the magazine came out in the February 2014, the first issue, and it was total amateur hour. We were Googling how do you make a magazine and watching YouTube videos, and I remember Julie downloaded the free trial of InDesign, and it gave you 30 days, and Julie was like, right, we've got 30 days to put this thing together before the trial expires. Absolute amateur hour, but it was out,
I mean, in that sense, then, you're a runner who made a magazine rather than a magazine publisher that liked running, right?
100%. Like, we really had I'd worked for a commercial printer, but my job there was, looking after clients, and we'd print, I don't know, all sorts of flyers and not really magazines at all. I was a consumer that wanted the thing that I was consuming for myself about the thing that I was passionate about.
I've heard loads of people say, make the magazine you want to read.
Well, at least you've got one customer. I mean, I think that happens in a lot of businesses in general. People sort of think, well, I want it. I'm going to assume that there's some other people out there that want it.
Yeah, no, I think it probably does. So that was 10, 11 years ago. When you look back on it, what's changed? I mean, I'm guessing that you've got your actual license for InDesign now.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Maybe we just keep downloading the free trial. No. We're much more legitimate now. I mean, I think there's 2 areas of change. So one is what's happened internally for us, and the other is what's happened out in the world. As I mentioned, Julie and I had this other business that we'd launched. So the magazine, for the first 9 years of its existence, we used to call it our evenings and weekends project. So we would come home from this other business that we owned, where we had an office. So we'd leave the house and go to the office, and we had a team. And we'd come home and have dinner. And then often at sort of 9 o'clock, we'd sit down and spend an hour and a half working. And then Sundays was long run day. So get up early, do the long run, get home, have a shower, fill up on food, and then spend the afternoon working on the magazine. We sold the first business that we had at the end of 2023, and that meant that we were then free to work full-time on the magazine. So that's been a massive change, and it's linked to the external change, which is that I think indie publishing is having a moment. It feels like there's even more challenges now than there were 11 years ago. But the popularity or just the kind of perception of independent magazines has improved. And at the same time, running is having a moment. Like post-pandemic, running is having a massive boom. You only need to be at the London Marathon this year to just see what's going on. It's wild. So I think the addressable market, to sound very commercial and horrible about it, the addressable market of people for a long-form, independent, coffee table style running magazine has just grown for those two reasons.
So the running part, I think I get. I think loads of people took up running during the pandemic. Why do you think the indie magazine side of that's changed? Why aren't they all just, and I'm sure loads of them do buy Runner's World, but why are they also looking for Like the Wind?
Going back to running having a boom, I think the concept of running being a lifestyle has solidified. So people, and it's true in any walk of life, right? People are passionate about a thing. They will want to signal that thing that they are into, whether it's rock climbing or surfing or cycling or baking or whatever it is. They want to immerse themselves really fully. There's a post that I read a couple of years ago by a guy called Peter Abrahams, absolutely brilliant, and he talked about the nichification of everything. I think people get deeper into whatever their passion is now, and they want to fill their life with as much of the things associated with that passion as possible. So I think there's a subsect of the running world, and it's 100% not everybody in running is a customer of Like the Wind, but there is a group for whom running is a lifestyle. It's their main passion. They're interested in it as a sport, as an activity. They're interested in the wider world of running, so they're not just thinking about themselves and their own 10K time or their own half marathon time. They're interested in seeing the world through the lens of running. It's a factor of this nichification, but also if you have more people doing something, you're just going to inevitably have more people that identify as that thing. There's millions of casual runners who I don't think would pick up a copy of Like the Wind. They'd be like, nah, it's not really for me. It's a bit too deep, but we don't need millions. A couple of 100,000 would be great.
I think that's an interesting mental shift for magazine publishers. The idea, 1,000 true fans. A lot of indie publishers are leaning into that idea. Okay, if I can get those 1,000 people, or maybe it's 5,000 people, maybe it happens to be 10,000 people. Surfers Journal or Mountain Gazette or whatever, I think it's 30,000 people. You're not talking internet scale anymore. You're talking, well, again, I'll go back to your marketing phraseology. It's addressable market, and what it costs to produce is matched by the number of people that are willing to buy it.
Well, also those people that are into it will pay for quality. I mean, Like the Wind is £12 for an issue. That's kind of expensive, but those are the same people that are spending £250 on a pair of running shoes, so they're not massively cost conscious, because for them it's their lifestyle, it's their everything. They're willing to invest.
Yeah, they're not spending loads of money on buying other things, they're spending it all on that passion.
No, exactly. And to your point, and I see this, I'm an outsider, I'm not a publishing veteran, so I'm seeing this from the outside, but I think there was a period where publishers thought they might be able to compete toe to toe with the social media and the internet, and they quickly learned that wasn't possible. And so as we arrived in 2014, I was already, as we started with issue 1, saying, I'm not trying to compete on numbers. I'm not even going to have that conversation. We didn't sell any advertising for the first 6 issues because I was like, I'm not going to have that conversation with people. And my first job out of university was working for a publisher as a sales rep. The only thing that you talked about when you went in to try and sell advertising was your circulation. That becomes super unimpressive when somebody can buy 100 million impressions on Facebook. You're like, well, what number am I going to give you that's going to make you think anything? And it's interesting because the conversations we've had with brands where they have said, what's the circulation? I shut down. I switch off. I'm like, okay, we're having the wrong conversation.
Yeah.
If you want numbers, I can tell you where to go. And it's not us.
So what is that pitch when you're talking to, I guess they're not really advertisers, are they? They're brand partners or sponsors or, whatever phraseology you use. What is the conversation?
It's around being part of a sort of an ecosystem linked to long-form storytelling in the running world. There's lots of elements to that. It's being part of in-person events. We love doing that kind of stuff. It's part of supporting storytellers, because we are obviously paying writers and photographers and illustrators in the running space. It's supporting journalism that talks about social issues through the lens of running. Brands sort of say, okay, well, we think that this conversation is important, so we're going to support the publication so that we have the means to then commission a writer to spend months looking at a topic. So we did 40 issues in 10 years. And then our 41st issue was our first ever women's edition. At that time, I was the editor. And so we hired a female editor. And that meant that the entire team was female. All the contributors were female, photographers, writers, illustrators. And we said it was by women, about women, for everyone. And the brands were like, yep, we want to support that. We want to raise the voice of women in the running space. So I'm not going to pretend that we don't have a conversation about how many copies we sell, but it's the last part of the conversation. It's not the first part of the conversation.
So how many copies do you sell?
Oh, it's a secret. Not enough is the answer. And, you know, one of the things that we acknowledge we've not done brilliantly in the sort of first 10 years is marketing the magazine, because it was a passion project and we sold enough copies through kind of organic growth. Our first issue, we printed 1,000 copies and we sold out, and it's only grown since then. But we weren't sort of very consistent and very diligent about marketing, because we had this other business that we were running. That's my excuse anyway. Now that's completely changed.
Where are your sales coming from? Are they mostly direct? Are they mostly through shop?
No, massively on subscription. Like 90% plus copies are sold through subscription or single copy sales on the website. I mean, I remember when we first started and we were like, again, so naive. I was like, so basically we'll be in WH Smith's. I just assumed that was how it worked. And then we figured out how that operates, you know, how that works, you know, where they take copies on consignment, of which they might sell 20%, 80% of them go straight in the bin, and you then get to charge them 50% of the copies they sold. So you're essentially getting 10% of the cover price, but you get to claim a circulation because you circulated the magazines. And I'm like, what? And the magazine I wanted to make, we couldn't do that. It wasn't financially viable for us to do that. Like, we'd be losing so much money. Then the only way to justify that wastage is to sell ads, and which also I didn't want to do. So out of necessity, we're of course in some amazing outlets. I mean, we're in Mag Culture, we're in Magma, like some places that present the magazine beautifully, and they sell copies, which is great, but it's not where we're going to get the volume. We are about to launch a program having the magazine in specialty run retail. That's something that's sort of, it's not unique to running, but it's specific in running, which is that there's been a huge resurgence in shops that are specifically for runners and about running. And those are the kind of places where people are going in to get fitted for their shoes, and they're picking up the best in class products, and Like the Wind will sit alongside those best in class products in those specialty run shops. So actually, 11 years after we started, with 90+% of our copies sold direct, we're about to sort of launch a program where we'll be in, the aim is at least 100 specialty run retailers in Europe and the US. But if they sell 20 each, that's only 2,000 copies. It's not going to be the bigger part of how we reach our readers.
Almost an awareness thing, isn't it?
I mean, I think that's the only way to think about it. And the options for reaching customers or readers is quite limited. Whilst I just said to you, if somebody says to me they want to reach millions of runners, I'm like, well, you better go to Facebook then, because we're not going to supply that. We're not the answer for that problem. We then end up trying to find runners through Facebook, ironically.
Is that a useful marketing platform for you?
Yeah, it is.
As much as you might hate it.
No, I don't hate it at all. I mean, this is the thing. I'm a huge fan of running in all its aspects. So I'm watching YouTube videos about running. I'm consuming running content on Instagram. I see Like the Wind as an and proposition, not an or proposition. My vision is that people will go for their run on a Sunday, come back, have a shower, grab a cup of coffee, sit down in an armchair and read 2 or 3 stories in Like the Wind. I'm not imagining for a second that somebody is not going to be then on social media, watching the telly, listening to the radio, consuming podcasts at all. I'm not trying to compete with the internet. It's cool. The internet's great. You know, there are only certain times of the day where you can and want to sit down and read a 3,000 word piece. There are loads of times in your life where you want to just get some quick fix, kind of scroll through some TikTok videos, and that's great. So, yeah, we use social media to try and reach those people for whom, running's a lifestyle and who want long-form storytelling to be part of their kind of media diet.
You mentioned challenges earlier on. You said the challenges has got stiffer. What do you mean by that?
Shipping's got a lot more expensive and challenging. I mean, for reasons that I probably don't need to go into, we've found it more difficult to ship into the US. Paper prices have been steadily on the march upwards. I mean, there was a point where we were facing paper price increases of like 30% every time we printed, and we print quarterly. I mean, it was crazy. Postage is more and more of a challenge. The reliability of postal services is difficult. We found ourselves in a situation where suddenly shipping from the UK means paying VAT in every single country in Europe, which is complicated. But you know what? All of these challenges are like a little litmus test. You hit another bump in the road, and the response of our readers and the response of the team is, okay, let's fix this, rather than, forget us, just pack up and go home. We've not yet found a reason to quit. We just keep going. We'll find a way.
I love that framing. You've made it 11 years because you haven't found a reason to quit.
Honestly, so Julie, my wife, who's the co-founder, if she was talking to you now, she would say, I threatened to quit regularly. We had this other business. There was a lot of pressure. So definitely at one point I said, look, we've done 10 issues. That's a good number. 10's a good number. There was a magazine called The Ride Journal. Oh, man, that magazine. I mean, if there is a magazine that we were directly trying to be, it was The Ride Journal. I've got the collection on the shelf, and my wife and I have moved a few times, and The Ride Journal, the 10 issues, I've got all 10. I wrapped them in bubble wrap. They stopped at 10. I remember saying, look, The Ride Journal stopped at 10. We can stop at 10. Then I think we did 26 issues, and we called it 26.2. So we did our 26th issue with a 0.2 supplement, because obviously that's the marathon distance in miles, 26.2 miles. And I was like, we could stop now. That's cool, stop. And a combination of Julie, but probably the other people who worked on the magazine, and the quality of the stories that people would send us. Every time I'd be like, oh, all right, we'll do one more. But it wasn't fun for a long time. It was bloody hard work.
Well, that's why you need those How Hard Can It Be t-shirts.
My How Hard Can It Be? I kind of got my revenge. We just did 3 issues one year. We just were like, we just can't do 4. We'll just do 3. But then the problem was we were going to hit our 10th anniversary with issue 39, which really annoyed me. So my How Hard Can It Be moment was like, well, we'll just do 2 issues at once for the 10th anniversary. How hard can it be? I lost friends in the team. They really didn't like me for that.
Can't imagine doing 2 at the same time. You talked about running having this moment, but also indie print is having a moment. Why do you think that is? Why are we still talking about this now? It's supposed to be dead, right?
Okay, so I have practical theories, and then I have probably wishful thinking theories. So practically, I think it's to do with what my friend Peter Abraham talked about, this nichification. I think people want to go really deep on their passion. Certain people want to get really, really into it. And that's why you have subreddits. And that's why people will go to events to be in a community of like-minded individuals or people that have got a shared passion. It's why podcasting has been such a powerful medium, because people will download every episode of a podcast that's about a topic that they really care about. So there's that nichification thing. I actually think there's been some technological advances like printing. When I started working for this litho printer when I was in my early 20s, anyone that came to us with a print project where they weren't printing like tens of thousands, we'd just be like, look, guys, it's not going to work. The print technology now means that it was viable for us with our first edition to print 1,000 copies litho and make a bit of money when we sold those copies. And I think digital printing has got to a stage now where you can print 200 copies and the quality will be amazing. So that has helped because it lowers the barriers to entry. It means that you don't have to start your project with tens of thousands of pounds of investment to pay for the print. And now, interestingly, in the last couple of years, I am going to pull we've been around for 11 years card. And in the last 18 months, I've heard of a couple of new magazines that are launching in the running space because they're also seeing that there is this apparent upswell in interest in indie titles authenticity, horrible, overused word, but I do think it's a real thing. The wishful thinking reason is that I think that some people, hopefully enough people, are just getting a little bit sort of over the whole social media thing. I'm 100% one of those people. So maybe I'm seeing this through the lens of my experience, but Julie sent me a video the other day and it's a comedian and he said, what's happened to Facebook? You know, you wake up in the morning, you open Facebook and the first thing it does is offer you a video of someone being murdered. And I really only went on there to find out whose birthday it was today. And I'm like, yeah, this is so true. It feels as though social media of 10 years ago is unrecognizable from what it is today. So my sort of wishful thinking reason is that I think people are just starting to feel a little bit of digital overwhelm. So there's some kind of analog media that they turn to that they think, well, I still want entertainment. I just don't necessarily want it to be on a social media channel. Or, you know, there seems to be more interest in vinyl. There's something about tactility, a romanticism, I suppose. It's people don't tend to put an Instagram image on their coffee table to signal that they're into a particular thing.
I've written in the past about how the whole comparison with vinyl is actually not right. If you look at the vinyl market, it disappeared. There was vinyl sales in 2005 were like $30 million. Print has always been worth billions of dollars. So vinyl sales in the 70s and the 80s were worth, I don't know what they were worth, billions of dollars. Now, with this big comeback that everyone's talking about, it's worth $1.4 billion. So it'll never be back to what it used to be.
But I don't know that print ever will either.
No, I don't think it will.
But I don't think it needs to. I'm not particularly worried about that. Like the Wind is not trying to be all things to all runners at all. Not even close. And I think running magazines in the past, there was an assumption that if you were a runner, it was the magazine for you. I'm definitely not saying that.
No, it's again, that's that nicheification, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just got to find your audience. And that's not easy, but the viability of the audience is not dependent on huge numbers. It's much more dependent on sort of passion and whether those people have shared values or their values align, or the values of Like the Wind align with their values. And then I think you have a totally different relationship with the audience, with the subscribers, the readers.
Quickly on that, loyalty. So if someone subscribes to Like the Wind, it's a horrible phrase, lifetime value. How long do they stay with you?
So for our anniversary, we had never done this. It's really now we've moved from it being a hobby into a real era of professionalization for Like the Wind. So we've more than doubled the size of the team. And the people that have joined the team are helping us to understand our audience, helping us to understand how we can deliver more for our audience. So we haven't hired more editors and more designers. We've got the same core team that make the magazine. We've now added people to help us to grow the business, essentially. So we looked at, which we'd never done, the number of people that have bought every issue for 10 years. And it was massive. I was absolutely shocked because we thought, what we should do is find out those people that have bought every issue for 10 years and send them something to say thanks. And we had to revise our plan because there were so many of them. I thought we'd just handwrite some cards and send them to say thank you for being with us for 10 years. And then suddenly it was like, oh no, hold on, there's a lot. People obviously do unsubscribe. Of course, that's par of the course. But I think the churn is really low. Again, I'm not an industry veteran, but I've spoken to people that have worked in what I would call more the kind of traditional magazine market, and they talk about the churn being, if not 100%, quite high. People come in, they buy a magazine, or they subscribe after a couple of issues, they're a subscriber for a year or maybe 18 months or whatever, and then they stop. Like the Wind is much more a collectible. So we have this wonderful experience. Every time we send out a new issue, we'll see on good old social media, which we love, we'll see people posting photos of them adding the new addition to their collection. They've got a bookshelf with 20, 30, 40 editions. And truthfully, it's not a super expensive product. I mean, I think our annual subscription's £48. It's not a wild amount of money.
That's that affordable luxury, right?
Do you know, so that must be a phrase that's, maybe you invented it, But that's exactly what I've heard from other indie magazine publishers who say what this is an affordable luxury. 100% that.
Economists actually talk about lipstick. They say when sales of lipsticks rise, it's a sign that there could be a recession coming because it's an affordable luxury. People would think, oh, I'll treat myself.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to have this concept in my head of, well, Rouleur, the cycling magazine, is going to be easier to sell because the people that buy it are spending £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 on a bike. So £100 for a subscription is cheap relative to what they're already spending. I don't actually think that's true anymore. But running is not as cheap as sometimes people make out. Especially with this new, there's a whole wave of brands that have come into the running space in the last decade, and they are selling a really premium product. And footwear technology has absolutely been revolutionized in the last 10 years. Annoyingly, since I stopped running properly, all the super shoes have suddenly appeared and everyone's running faster times than ever. But I'm not bitter at all. But those sorts of things, I mean, you can easily walk into a running shop now and you buy a pair of shoes and a jacket and a pair of shorts and you'll have spent £500. Easy. So actually, Like the Wind does become an affordable luxury. It's like, maybe I won't buy that new pair of £230 trainers. But 48 quid on a subscription to Like the Wind arrives 4 times a year. Sure. I don't know how many of your listeners will sort of be runners and be aware of this, but back in the day when I used to run a lot, the energy gel packs, you get these energy, they used to be like, I'm sure they were £1 each. And the other day I needed to buy some. I went into a running shop. They were £3.20. I picked up 10 because I was like, well, I need 3 for this run and then 4 for that run. And then, so I picked up 10. The guy's like, that's £32, please. And I was like, I'm going to have eaten those in the next 2 weeks. And for not much more money, I could start a collection of Like the Wind and have 4 issues delivered to my front door.
So if someone's coming along and thinking, okay, this print thing is interesting, what would your advice be? How would you?
Well, the first thing is not very helpful, which is Like the Wind would not exist and would not have worked if it hadn't been for the fact that Julie and I had another business that was successful, that worked. People have told me, well, Like the Wind's been a success since day one. I mean, there were many, many, many occasions where Julie and I were basically taking money out of our savings to pay contributors or to pay for the print. The first few editions, because it was only shortly after we'd launched our other business that we launched the magazine, the first few issues, we literally had no money in our lives. So we would run around asking people for stories and say, look, we can't pay you. We couldn't pay people. For the first few years, 3 years, I guess. So I suppose my advice would be a source of revenue, a source of income that's independent from the magazine is going to be really helpful. And I know in some cases people do that through crowdfunding to get started, or, there's some titles out there that have gone down the traditional investment route. But I think you've got to have some sort of means, some financial means to get started. I would say go and ask for advice. When we launched Like the Wind, we got an email from a guy called Bruce Sandell, who was the managing director at Rouleur, and he invited us down to their offices. And Julie and I felt like we were going down to meet the Pope. And we went into their offices, which were magnificent. There was a bookshelf in this meeting room with every issue of Rouleur. And we were like, oh my God. And Bruce came in and he sat down at the conference table and he said, how can I help you? And I was blown away. I was like, what do you mean? He said, how can I help you? What do you need to know? Incredible. I mean, hats off to Bruce, because he didn't need to do that. So I would say people that are launching should try and make friends with people that have been around the block, because we've been there, we've done it, we've made the mistakes. I suppose my only other bit of advice, which is not super helpful, is do it for the right reasons. It's not, certainly initially, this is not going to be a route to sort of fame and riches. And so we launched Like the Wind because we wanted those stories in a format that we enjoyed. So it was just utter joy every time an issue came out, or we saw somebody reading an issue. And the thrill of that is still, every time I see somebody... I met a guy, I was in Boston for the marathon a few weeks ago, and I was in a shop, and this guy came up to me and and he said, excuse me, are you Simon from Like the Wind? And honestly, I was like, this is the most exciting. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, oh, I love Like the Wind. And he had a bag, like a courier bag over his shoulder. And he went, oh, I love Like the Wind. And he opened the flap and he took out a copy of Like the Wind. And I was like, dude, you have made my week. This is incredible. I think if you can get that thrill from doing it, then hopefully the commercials will work out. But I think if you try and put the commercials first, either the product is not going to fill people with joy, or it's not going to become something that will get you through the tough times. There will be tough times. There'll be moments when you're like, gee, this is hard. And maybe that goes back to me when I used to say, let's quit, let's stop. And the reason we never did was because it would only take one person to send us an email saying, oh, I've just discovered your magazine and I love it. And I'd be like, great, let's do another 20 issues. Let's put another 7 years of our lives into this. So find that, I think, is the advice.
Thanks so much to Simon for speaking to us. If you want to read more about the print revival, download our report for free from voices.media/print revival. And don't forget, we have a write-up of the key learnings from this interview on voices.media, or dropping into your inbox every Tuesday if you've signed up to the publisher newsletter, also on voices.media. We'll be back next week with another look at the people and products powering publishing's future. Until then, keep up with all things Media Voices by following us on LinkedIn and subscribing to the publisher newsletter over on voices.media.